questions you've always wanted to know. Ask Kati Anything.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad that you're here, and thank you to everyone who sent in your questions. As per usual, they are wonderful and different and super interesting to talk about, think about, all that stuff. So let's start off with the first question. This question says, "Hi Kati, why do I feel so much less inclined to do something when someone tells me or asks me to do it? If my therapist gives me tough love, it backfires. But when I'm left to take action on my own, unpressured, then I will get there. Also, for example, I might go to my mom's house with the intention of cutting her grass for her. However, if she asks me to do it, I suddenly become angry, internally angry, and don't want to. Why could this be?" Now, there are two comments that are add-ons to this, but I thought this was really interesting. Now, first of all, we usually see this in children, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen in adults, because I also fall into this camp. It's something that I worked on in therapy. So I'll give you some therapeutic thoughts and insights and then my own personal experience. So we see it a lot in children, and it's usually with children around the age of like teen, preteen, and it's done as a way to like assert ourselves and our independence and push back against boundaries. And it's pretty common. It's almost like a normal form, because something that I think is important for all of us to know, that it's a healthy part of our development to do this kind of like self-assertion, independence, push back against boundaries. It's essentially our way of like building our own self-confidence and noticing what's available to us and not within our space and in our world, like what's allowed, what's not. It's part of just learning and development, and it's incredibly healthy and just part of our plan. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because this can happen from a therapist perspective for a lot of reasons. Number one, it could be because when we were a teenager, we were parentified, meaning we never really got to like challenge and push back and assert ourselves because we were too busy taking care of other people. That can cause this, it can lead to this happening later in life, because whether we want to admit it or not, we all need to do it at some point. And for those of us who weren't able to do it at, our preteen, teen years, we'll do it later on when we can. Okay. So that could be one reason. Another reason could be that we were walked all over as kids, meaning that our parents never let us do anything. They could have been like helicopter parents or physically abusive, ruled with an iron fist, right? We couldn't do anything, couldn't push back. And so when anybody, as an adult, when anyone tries to, tell us that we have to, or this is what we're going to do, or any of that, we're like, absolutely not, right? We push back with force. And so that could be another reason why. And then there's part of from my experience, it was kind of a backlash of my people-pleasing behavior. It was almost like I couldn't find a healthy way to, like a healthy middle ground, I guess. Because if you guys don't know, I struggle with people-pleasing. I still off and on, like where I just don't like conflict. So I'll do things to just appease people, even to my own detriment. Like even if I don't want to do the thing, or I don't like that person really, I don't want people upset with me. That's like bothersome. And so because I would do that, and then I was trying to stop doing that, I swung into this, like, how dare you ask me to do something? I'll do it only if I want to. And it took me a while to kind of swing around until I found this like balance in the middle. And so part of your work on this is going to just be to be curious about your own origin for this. It could also just be a defense mechanism, right? We feel pressured to do things, and that pressure causes us to shut down, hence us getting angry and not wanting to do it, right? That pushback. And so we're better off to do it on our own. There could be a lot of different reasons, but I want you to be curious about it for you. Do you think you were a parentified child, a people pleaser, and trying to figure that out? Were your parents like super authoritarian and didn't let you make any decisions for yourself? Do you feel like you never got a chance to do this? What was it? Be curious, and let me know in those comments if anything came up for you, or if there was something new, that you want to share, something I missed, right? Because I can't get 100% of it right all the time, right? Now, there was a comment that said, as an add-on, what could a therapist do to work with this client? What kind of deep roots are associated with this behavior? Now, it would really depend on the patient. And what I would do is I would just call attention to it. A lot of work as a therapist is just softly calling attention to patterns that you see. So I'd say something to my patients like, I've noticed that when I offer you homework, you don't want to do it. And there's some pushback that I sense from you. Or, when I give you this homework, you don't do it. But when you come to something on your own, you do. I'm curious about that, right? We'd have to just dig into it. Where's this coming from? And so I would bring it up and start talking it through, and then would try to find the root. So through kind of like questioning, like not even in CBT, they call it like downward arrow questioning, which is what I was going to say, but that's not really it. Downward arrow really means like, let's say I'm like, well, what comes up for you then? Well, then I think that if I did do the thing, then I'd be giving into them. Okay, so you gave into them. What would that mean? And what would that mean? And we just kind of track down farther until we come up with kind of like the deep falsely held belief. Now we could do that kind of work, but I find sometimes with stuff like this, that could be too much too fast, and that could cause us to shut down again. And so the questions I would try to make the questions be the least triggering possible. So I'd ask things like, I sense some pushback and need to shut down. And does that make you feel powerful to be able to assert yourself? Or is it, do you feel like that's part of your independence? I would ask questions kind of not necessarily leading, but soft, like that I understand. Like this is a normal part of being a person, let's be curious about why this is happening. Has this happened before in any other scenario? What was that like? Being curious about that. And then that would be the work. I would purposefully not offer any homework. I might even do what I call anti-homework, which is like, I don't want you to do X, Y, or Z and see what happens. Sometimes the I don't want you to will get the same result, or other times it'll be like, I don't have to. Like I had a patient before who was a super perfectionistic people pleaser type, and I told her I didn't want her to do anything. I wanted her to ignore what I said during session. And I know I said do that, but I changed my mind. Don't do it. And it was just kind of funny because that like anti-homework, it was like really hard for her to not try. But then I was like obeying order. And, we talked about what came up for her and what that brought up. And so, there could be a couple different ways I go about it. And depending on whether there's trauma in the past and that's where this is coming from, or parentification, we would work through one of those things so that until my patient started to feel better and we could find other ways to navigate around it, or just acknowledge when it's coming up and move forward anyways. But obviously it just depends on the person. Now, the last comment on this said, same. This is a behavior that I see mostly in children. Yes. Is it supposed to change in the process of becoming a healthy adult, or does it just stay in everyone? And some of us have trouble controlling that feeling. Is it possible that this feeling is not always there, but our caregivers condition it? This is really interesting. So yes, it does happen in children. Like I said, it's part of healthy development. Now, technically speaking, in a perfect world, which none of us grew up in, we wouldn't necessarily need to do this as an adult. Yes, I could see it coming up in like workplace scenarios or relationships, maybe where we have to kind of assert ourselves because people are trying to walk all over us, but it would be done in a more communicative fashion. Whereas when we're teenagers and stuff, we're in like early teens, we don't always have the language and we don't maybe know what's going on. And so we can push back with behavior because we don't know how to communicate. But as we get older, I always encourage people to use their words, tell people at work, hey, that's not okay. You can't talk to me that way. We're both adults, and I would, I would expect you to reach out ahead of time. We can assert ourselves a little bit more adult-like. So those are my thoughts about that. And it says, is it possible that this feeling is not always there, but our caregivers condition? Our caregivers can definitely instigate it, or that can be the way that they engage with other people. Therefore, we don't have a good model. Like there's no role model to base our interactions with others on. Our parents might have been like super childish and lash out and like shut down and, like stomp their feet and throw a tantrum. We could definitely pick up on that from them and think that that's like healthy, normal behavior, because that's all we knew, right? That's all that was modeled for us. We have no other representative to show us a healthier way. And that's honestly where therapy can be really beneficial, because having a therapist role play things with us, walk us through how things maybe could look more healthy, could really be beneficial, and we could learn from that as well. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. This question says, hi, Kati. I don't think I was ever emotionally abused or neglected, but I still feel like there was some sort of childhood wound or dysfunction in my family that made me into the anxious, timid, and closed off person that I am today. I feel like there was lots of passive aggression with my dad and my stepdad, like them having nonverbal expectations. God, those are like passive aggressive behavior. We all do it, but man, is it toxic and so frustrating. Then they'd get disappointed or annoyed when I didn't do what they wanted because I can't read their minds, right? They want me to take initiative and say things like, I shouldn't have had to tell you, you should have just done it. What? So now I always think people are upset with me, but not telling me because both my father figures do that instead of communicating. And I always feel like an inconvenience. For example, lots of times when I asked my parents to drive me somewhere, they told me to ask someone else to take me. They don't like going much out of their way, and I hate asking for anything because I don't want to bother anyone. Even though there was no abuse or neglect, I still feel traumatized and have trauma symptoms. Can you talk about this? I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that this is emotional neglect. I know it may not feel like it because we downplay things a lot, but let's just consider for a moment what happened. You would get in trouble for things that weren't communicated to you. So we never knew what was going on. We never knew what was expected of us. We never knew how to do things to get love or support from a parent because it was a constant moving target that we couldn't see, right? Because it didn't tell us. I think that's emotional abuse right there. Then they would punish us for things that we didn't do because we can't read their mind. And then we also were neglected. They wouldn't even go out of their way to take us somewhere. They would never prioritized us. We never felt important. We never felt valued, all of which are very important things for a child to hear and feel. That is abuse and neglect. And I know it's hard sometimes for us to acknowledge it. And a lot of times when it comes to emotional neglect or emotional abuse, we downplay it because it didn't leave a mark. Well, it left a pretty big emotional mark, right? And that's really why you're having these trauma symptoms. Now, I can talk about the fact that we can feel like we aren't traumatized and still have trauma symptoms, but I'm just here to tell you that anybody out there who's thinking, oh, I wasn't really traumatized, but I still have these trauma symptoms. You were traumatized. You've just downplayed these little T's, meaning smaller traumas. I know we think of, and when I talk about little T's, just really briefly, if you haven't heard me talk about this before, there's big T and little T trauma. Big T being something like I was in a car accident. I was like physically abused. I had this big event happen, right? It could be one big thing or a bunch of big things, right? I was there was a drive-by shooting at my house and I had to jump in our tub. Like I was watching the news today and this poor child in the Ukraine was like, yeah, we're sitting in school and we hear gunfire and they just tell us to act like normal. I'm like, that's not good. And I feel for them. And I'm like, oh my God, they're going to be they're traumatized. And so we can have these big events, or we can have a bunch of small events that still can lead up to us having PTSD or having a trauma response. And for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about when I talk about little T traumas, what I mean is that we often think of traumas as these big events, right? I was in a car crash, or I was, beat up by this, I was assaulted in an alleyway, or some big event. I went to war, right? And these can be multiple large events, like I was physically abused for years or went to war, it could be long. There can be multiple traumas in those experiences, but there can also be little T's. So big T's being like, all it takes is that one large instance to lead to PTSD or to cause us to develop PTSD. Or we can have these little T traumas, things like I went through a divorce. I was emotionally neglected off and on as a kid. I was bullied for a little period of time, or I went through a really bad breakup, or I moved a lot. There can be a lot of these smaller T's that we maybe wouldn't associate with trauma or think they're traumas, but they still are, and they can still have the same effect on us. We just tend to minimize them or overlook them and move through life anyways. And that's what I feel like is happening here, is that a lot of times we'll think, there wasn't any abuse or neglect, but I challenge you to like look a little bit deeper, think a little bit more about it. If there was no abuse or neglect, why are we having these symptoms, right? If we looked at it from an outside perspective, would we have a different view? And chances are the answer is yes. And so I just really want you to consider that from a different perspective, because it sounds like you're kind of downplaying what happened to you and saying it wasn't abuse or neglect. And I'm looking at this and reading this question saying, yes, there was abuse and neglect. So I hope that helps. I hope that kind of makes sense of, of what's going on for you and helps you be a little bit more kind to yourself and a little more validating, because what you experienced was trauma. And I'm so sorry you went through that. And let's move on to question number 3. And this says, hello, Kati and everyone. I've got a question about little traumas or little T's. This is sometimes your questions and the number of likes they get, they roll right into one another. It says, why do little T's feel like not, quote unquote, not a big deal? Do you need to talk about or re-experience all the little T's? How do you know which ones you need to talk about in therapy as a patient and also as a therapist? Thanks for all your information and your help. Greetings from the Netherlands. Or, and I'm not even going to try to say it. Well, I can try, but it's going to be totally butchered. Grooteg und Nederland. I totally butchered that. And I apologize to all my people from the Netherlands. Okay, so I thought this was a great question. Now, if you don't recall, I did a video with my friend, Dr. Alexa Altman. She's a trauma specialist. And I don't even know which video it is that we were in together. I think it was one of our first few. But when it comes to little T's and processing them, what they have found, and they being researchers in the trauma field, they have found that we don't have to go through each and every trauma in our life, big T, little t, whatever. We don't necessarily have to process through each and every one. Oftentimes, when we process one, so the way that she talked about it is like, sometimes if we process a larger, meaning it doesn't mean it was a bigger event. It means it maybe holds more emotional charge for us, meaning it's more upsetting, or even it just tends to affect us more today than other ones, right? So because of that, let's say, we experience that, or we're dealing with that trauma all the time. So if we're trying to deal with that little T all the time, that's the one that we should start with. And that's not up to you as the patient. Don't worry. You might know and innately be like, this is the thing that's upsetting me. Most of the time we don't. And you can leave that up to your therapist, because what we're going to look for is the trauma or traumas that we tend to reenact or have flashbacks about the most, or maybe it's a pattern of behaviors that track back to this, or the way that it's affecting our relationships. There could be a lot of different things we're going to look at to try to figure out which of these small T's, or traumas rather, we don't even have to say big or little, just the traumas in our life, which one or two or so of these are affecting us the most. And then those are the ones that we're going to focus on first, because what Alexa told me is that through research, we know that when you work on those ones that are the most active kind of in our life, or the most disturbing, by processing those, a whole group of others that could be associated with that in one or multiple ways are processed at the same time. So it's almost like I don't even know, it'd be like doing an exercise. Let's say we're working out. Doing an exercise that doesn't just target one muscle, it targets like 6. And so that's what we're kind of looking for, is like, what is that exercise we can do? What's that trauma that we can focus on that will like scoop up the most? And so we get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. And so that's something that you're going to have to kind of negotiate with your therapist and try to talk about as much as you can of the kind of the groupings of what took place and what happened to you. That's why I do trauma timelines a lot. And I've talked about it in my book, Traumatized, how important it is to do those, because even if we don't want to talk through each and every one of them, we can put little markers that like, oh, something happened here. This is kind of like when the bullying happened from a bunch of people. And then, oh, things happened here. This is when my parents got divorced, right? We can kind of mark them out. This is when I had to move schools 3 times in 1 year. We can put those things down. And even though we maybe don't want to talk through them in detail, we can at least be aware. And that can help your therapist better narrow down like which one to work on, so that we can get like, again, the most bang for our buck. Now, there was a question on the top of this that said, also maybe an add-on to this, I find it really difficult to explain my little T's, as they feel so quote unquote normal to me on one hand. But there are also so many of my little T's that I find difficult to describe. For example, certain body languages and context, as my memories are vague and they all add up and mix together somehow. I hope that makes sense. Also, really curious on how to deal with this in therapy. Even more greetings from the Netherlands. Wonderful. Okay, so good question. Now, that's why I think trauma timelines are our way in. Sometimes it's hard, like you said, to put a language to it or context around what happened, but see if a timeline could be that way in, because then your therapist can have a greater awareness of all the things that you went through, even if it's just little notes. Like I said, like I was bullied during this time, or it's a time when I don't have very much memory, but I do know, that my parents were fighting, or, they were going through divorce, or I don't know, it could be any number of things. It's totally up to you. I'm just making up random scenarios. And then, oh, this was when I had to move schools, and this is when I was assaulted at one time. Like we might just be able to plunk down a couple of things or a grouping of times when like, oh, I don't have much memory here. Not sure what happened, ? But we don't have to give it any context. We don't have to give it a ton of language. We can just say a little bit about what happened. Was it like assault? Was it bullying? Was it, issues at home? Was our parent drinking or doing drugs or something? Was there something we witnessed? Any of those things, you could plunk those down, and you'll be surprised how putting it on a timeline, you'll know that when you put them down, it's going to be moved a lot, because you will think that something happened at like, let's say age 8, and then we'll be like, oh my God, I was like 12, but this thing happened at age 8. And you'll want to move things around. You'll be like, no, this happened before that. And so we just kind of shift them. And I think that might help you kind of get in, because like you're playing double dutch with your traumas, and it's like, I don't know where to start, or how do I mention it? I can't even talk about it. Ooh. And so it can feel all mixed together. And doing a timeline can just kind of help us make sense of what feels like chaos in our head. And so I'd really encourage you to do that and let me know, how that goes, because I really think that is the best way. And then again, going back to my answer at the first part of this question, then you would try to find the one that had the most emotional charge for you, and you would want to work on that one first. Okay? Cool. Let's move on to question number 4. And this says, this probably won't get any likes, but I'm genuinely curious. Would you ever consider offering mini courses for therapists? I'm about to jump into the field, and I have learned so much from you. Seriously, my professors are impressed by my knowledge. You just explain things so well, and your insight is extremely helpful. I would absolutely pay for a mini course, maybe for starting therapists, or offering tips on balancing an online presence to help those who can't get therapy while keeping things professional in the office. Literally anything. To be truthful, I'd never thought about it. When I saw this question come up, I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, I like doing workshops. It's a lot of work for me. Emphasis on the work and the workshop. It's been a lot of work for me. And so I haven't had the bandwidth between the book and moving. And then we did that workshop about relationships, which is still available. You can watch the live streams and interact and download those worksheets and honestly get just as much out of it. I haven't done one since then. That was like last May. I guess May and June, because we did 6 weeks. But yeah, I mean, I definitely could. I guess I'd have to figure out like how long and what we're trying to do and what you think would be beneficial. I've done some CEUs, meaning continuing education units or courses rather, for other professionals. I've done a few of those, one about ethics, and like boundaries in therapy and implementing those, and then another about like self-injury. But I think this would be a little bit different if I was doing it for therapists starting out. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to thoughts on it, and I'll definitely put it in like on my list of things to consider and try to prioritize and figure out. But I would definitely offer mini courses. I guess I just didn't realize that it would be of interest to anybody. So thanks for the idea. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. It says, hi, Katie, can you talk about the consequences of getting the silent treatment from a parent? Ooh, neglect. I lived together with my girlfriend, and I've noticed recently that isolating from her due to COVID is a huge trigger for me, because it reminds me of how my parents used to withhold love and affection from me or stop talking to me whenever I did something wrong. Could that still affect my relationships today? You betcha. And if so, how can I deal with it? My girlfriend and I have really good communication, and I've asked her to always let me know when there's something going on, but when there isn't, how do I stop this thought spiral in my head? So you were emotionally neglected. When parents withhold love or affection as either punishment or just because they never, they were always like that. And that would be like, again, back to that emotional neglect. Of course, it can be a trigger for us. And of course, it was trauma. Essentially, you were abused, and it's trauma. And so I think the best way to deal with this is to first let your girlfriend know. There's nothing wrong with telling her that, hey, my parents used to give me the silent treatment and, avoid me when they were mad or when I was in trouble. Instead of communicating or forgiving, they would just ignore. And so when we have to isolate, or when, for health reasons, you're ignoring me, I find myself very triggered, and it's very difficult for me. And the truth about this is getting into therapy is going to be your best friend. It's going to be the best way for you to work through this, because we have to dig into what kind of internalized messages came from this silent treatment, right? Was that you're not good enough? Is it that you're not important? Is it no one loves you? What came up for you? That's what we really, I mean, I know it sounds like maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it, but this is a big deal. And I think dealing in therapy to figure out like, what did I tell myself about those situations and like what happened? Because you're acting out of those now. So because that's why it's triggering. It's because we have these messages in our brain about like, oh, when I'm ignored or when I'm isolated from others, it means I'm bad. Something's wrong with me. I did something wrong and I deserve this, right? Because that was their punishment. So I'd assume it's something around there and like, I'm never going to be good enough. No one's ever going to love me. I don't know what messages you tell yourself, but we have to spend some time to figure out what they are, because in that's where we can start the healing. Because that's technically like the root of this. That's really, what's still affecting your relationships is firmly held beliefs from the past that aren't true, but that our trauma and our experience told us was true. And so we have to find a way to argue back. And so that can be through, noticing the thoughts and challenging it with some bridge statements. It could also be around communication and like paving a new way in our relationships, meaning that like if you and your girlfriend are able to talk through this and she's able to recognize when you're being triggered and like make a point of being like, this, remember, this isn't me shutting you down or giving you the silent treatment. I love you very much. You're very important to me. This is about health and safety, and just giving you some of those words of affirmation as we work to challenge that automatic thought that comes up or thoughts that are accompanying this isolation, if that makes sense. Okay, now there's a comment on this that says, to add on, my mom does this to me currently and it hurts my feelings so intensely. I only see the bad things about her until I do something she likes or wants and likes people pleasing. Oh, and it's like people pleasing magic. She carries on with me, jokes, venting about her day, complimenting my appearance, etc., as though we didn't have 2 to 4 days of zero communication. That is terrible. Worse yet, I find myself giving a really great friend of mine in undergraduate the silent treatment when I felt hurt by her, although we've mended things now and I apologize for my behavior. I know I've lost a deep friendship because of the hurt that I caused her. I'm afraid of ruining my friendships or potential relationships in the same way as I develop few but deeply intimate platonic relationships that hurt all the more when I cause separation. I'm currently in therapy and was diagnosed with borderline. I am 25. So I'm very suspicious of your mother, and sounds like a narcissist. I'm not diagnosing her, but some of those things are very like the silent treatment. And then if you do something that people pleases her, then she jokes and then compliment. It's a very weird dynamic and very unhealthy. And essentially, my goal for you would to be to get out of there. Like you need to minimize your contact with your mom. I'm not saying cut her off by any means, but until you heal, until you have better ways to deal with her off and on, hot, cold, she could be a narcissist or she could be borderline. I don't really know. There's some overlap in some of the symptoms, and I only have a couple, symptoms that I'm working from, but that relationship's super toxic for you right now and super detrimental to your mental health. And I would really encourage you to move out if you can, or save up, like put a plan together to get the hell out of there, because this constant silent treatment and this unhealthy dynamic between you and her is now affecting your relationships where you don't know how to have healthy conflict. Because I think that one of the problems, even my family didn't know how to have healthy conflict. My family was like, oh, we just don't fight. Nobody liked conflicts. It was like, la, la, la. And so I grew up hating it. And if people raise their voices, it was super triggering to me. I remember I had a really good friend, Jamie, growing up, and her family was like they'd yell at each other and like fight out loud. And it wasn't that they didn't love each other or anything like that. It was just the way that they dealt with things. That's just how they were. And I did not grow up in that. And so being over at her house, I was like, oh my God. And I'd go home and tell my mom, I was like, they just yell all the time. They fight all the time. My mom's like, were they really fighting? And I would think about it and I was like, no, I guess they were trying to decide on dinner, but it felt like fighting because their voices were raised and I don't like that. So anyways, I bring that up to say that like what you're learning is really unhealthy, and we need you to be able to have healthy conflict. Because conflict is healthy. It's okay to tell someone that hurt my feelings and I'm upset with you. And for them to say, I'm upset with you. You did this. And to have this little scuffle where then we communicate what went on and how we feel. They communicate what went on for them and how they feel. We either compromise, we both apologize, and we move forward. That's actually a very healthy part of development and something that I had to put in some extra effort and work into, and still not the most comfortable with conflict. I can tolerate it. I can sit in it and know it's going to be okay, but I don't like engage in it easily like other people do. And so anyways, I want you to get into therapy if it's available to you. If not, trying to find like a cheaper option online, or if you're in school, a lot of times, like I benefited from free therapy at Pepperdine in school all through undergrad and grad. And I don't think it ever cost me a penny, you guys. It was just part of my schooling. And so I'd encourage you to look into that if you can. Anyway, finding some therapy for a reasonable rate will really be beneficial, because essentially what you dealt with was emotional abuse. And I suspect that your mom was either a narcissist or borderline or something like that. So overall, the fact that you're in therapy is great. I just realized I didn't read, even though I did read, it didn't like sink in that you're currently in therapy. And so I really think talking to your therapist about this and role playing out some healthy conflict. And the diagnosis of borderline would kind of make sense, I guess, too, because my patients who are borderline, even though people might not understand this on the outside, thinking, oh, I've had a borderline relationship and they, we fought crazily. People who are borderline personalities, who have borderline personalities, or do not like conflicts, it's so painful, but then we can lash out of that pain. And so it's like just really uncomfortable. So overall, we usually don't like it, and we can do the silent treatment as a result. But what I really think is, talk to your therapist about this and role play out some of the ways that we can have healthy conflict and how we can negotiate and talk about how we feel. And a lot of it's going to be that emotion regulation component, mixed obviously with interpersonal effectiveness. And those are two components of DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy. And if you haven't picked up that workbook, I have it in my Amazon store. If you go to amazon.com/shop/Kati Morton, it's the green one from McKay and somebody else. I forget the other author's name, but it can be really great and beneficial, because with some of those emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness skills, we can get this under control. Okay. Moving on to question number 6. It says, hi, Kati. When I'm happy, I can't enjoy it. I instantly get upset and want to cry, and sometimes I hurt myself. Do you have any idea why this could be and how I could stop this? Just some background. I was neglected, physically, emotionally, and sexually abused throughout my childhood, but now have a safe and settled life. Thanks for all that you do. Your podcast helped me calm down each and every night. It's been a great help. Oh, I'm so glad. Now, this is a great question, because being happy can feel just as scary and uncomfortable as being sad or angry or any other number of emotions. And the reason for this is that when we feel happy or good or excited, we can think that something's bad is going to happen, right? The last time I felt happy or excited, I don't know. Then my parents got divorced, or then I lost that tournament, or then I was abused in some way, right? We can think that feeling safe, especially when we have trauma in our past, feeling safe and excited leaves us vulnerable to more pain. Does that make sense? It's like even by the sheer effort, or I don't even know what the word I'm looking for, but even just the act of me getting excited means that I'm looking forward to something. And, I feel all sorts of bubbling up and emotion, and my defenses are down. Right? I'm not angry, don't have my spines out if I'm puffer fishing. I'm not depressed. I'm not isolating. I'm not curling inward. I am open. I am available. I am excited. I am happy. That we can worry, I just touched the microphone, sorry. Worry can make us more vulnerable to pain and upset. And that's why you instantly are getting upset and want to cry, is because that feeling of happiness is too vulnerable for you and means that pain might come. And that could be your history. And also, I do want to throw in this caveat that it could be even if we don't experience happiness very often. Sometimes I have patients in the past who they get happy, and then they're sad about the fact that they don't feel this way very often. And I know that can be like, what? Why is my brain doing that? It's something that's foreign. We're not used to it. And then we're kind of sad about the fact that we're not used to it. So we're like, this is happiness. How am I not used to this? And it can make us kind of spiral into a depression. Which I know is, it makes sense to me, but maybe for you, you're like, why do we do that? it's foreign. We're not used to it. We're worried about what this means. And it's sad that we don't have it because we know happiness is supposed to be a good thing, right? Blah, 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 all that judgment. Okay. Now the way to stop this, and this person, obviously, they have abuse in their background. So the trauma would be, like I said, if we have trauma in our history, it can be because that like quote unquote safety or security or excitement we can feel with happiness makes us more vulnerable to more abuse. And so we can get upset and want to like stick our spines out again, right? Like, how dare I let myself be so vulnerable? That's not okay. Honestly, the best way to stop this is to work with a therapist who specializes in trauma and to start working through, whether it's through somatic experiencing, meaning moving our body to move ourselves out of that freeze state, or whether it's through EMDR, the eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing, or whether it's through traditional talk therapy, whatever works for you. Working through that trauma will allow you to finally, in the future, at some point, enjoy happiness. But my goal for you right now wouldn't be for you to feel happy or safe. It would be for you to feel neutral. And the reason that we talk about that, and Alexa's the one that told me about this, is because happy can be triggering, like you're experiencing. Happy is triggering. And obviously sadness, anger, all those things can be triggering. And so we really just want to find ourselves in like the middle, in a neutral phase. And we can get to neutrality through doing something that's repetitive, like folding the laundry, putting the dishes away, coloring, something that's just very non-taxing, very neutral, very something I do every day kind of thing, like a ritual. Washing our face and taking a shower, things like that can also be kind of a neutral state. First, it all obviously depends on what your triggers are and stuff like that. But if we can find that neutrality, that's where we want to hang out, because that's where we'll be able to do that work in therapy. So let your therapist know that you're experiencing this, and you want to work, towards neutrality. You can even tell them like, hey, I asked a question on this podcast by a therapist and she mentioned this. But that's really the best way, is then to work through that trauma. And trust me when I tell you that this feeling will go away, or this difficulty with the happiness feeling will go away. Now, there was a comment on this as a follow-up question. Is this the same as self-sabotage? My therapist says that I mess stuff up when it's going well because I don't think I deserve good things, which is true, but I don't feel like I'm aware of or in control of making the choices to mess it up. How can I stop doing this? This is a little bit different. So self-sabotage isn't that I feel happy, so I feel vulnerable, so therefore I cry and want to harm myself. Sabotage is kind of what you're talking about, like that I don't think I deserve good things, or if I allow good things to happen, then only bad things are going to happen, which I could see kind of that overlap with that happiness, right? If I allow those good things to happen, then maybe if you have trauma in your background, you'd be like, it's going to leave me more vulnerable to more pain and trauma and upset. Then that could be very similar. But I think in the case of what your therapist is saying, because I'm going to trust your therapist, they know your story much better than I do, that you don't think you deserve good things, which you said is true, right? So it's probably a falsely held belief from our past, like our parents told us that we weren't good enough, or we didn't do something enough, or Lord only knows. And so we don't think that we deserve anything good. So then we sabotage, because if we allow ourselves to have wonderful, amazing things, then we can feel like, well, then who am I? Wait, but I thought that was true, right? It's like we're challenging the foundation of who we think we are. And so the best way to navigate this is to check our facts and to look for things that disprove that like belief that I don't deserve good things. And a lot of that's going to be healing the trauma and talking through it, but it's also going to be, again, checking our facts and noticing things in our environment that don't support that belief, and questioning why we still hold on to it. And it's going to be difficult, and it can be hard and take time, but we can change those beliefs. We can learn a new way of thinking. Okay. And also, I just want to let you know that most people don't feel in control of self-sabotage. It's something we do unconsciously, but just drawing our awareness to it and kind of noticing it might even be helpful for you to spend some time in therapy where you consider like what you did early on to lead into that self-sabotage. It might be like, for instance, one of my patients, when like good things would happen, she like wouldn't follow up with them. Like, let's say she got a call back on a job and they were like, we'd like you to start. She would like put off calling them back because like they're going to change their mind or whatever. And then they would think that she didn't want the job and they give it to someone else. And something simple. I know it's a very simple example, but there are others that we can consider and think about, like relationships and things that we do that harm us and harm what we want. So just be curious about those past experiences with self-sabotage. What did you do? What were the like early behaviors, so that we can notice them happening earlier on, so that we don't continue doing them, right? So then we know kind of the red flags before we're like in full sabotage mode. When we find ourselves like wanting to isolate or wanting to lash out or wanting to ignore something important, or I don't know what your symptoms could be, but just start being curious about those past experiences so we can learn from them and not do them again. And obviously working through, our own trauma past and stuff like that can be really beneficial as well, like I said. And that can maybe slowly stop that urge. But in the meantime, it's really going to be helpful for us to know those red flags early on. Okay, question number 7. It says, "Hey, Katie, why do I react so strongly to children crying and whining? To set the scene, I am a 22-year-old female and am dating a 25-year-old man with 2 little daughters, ages 2, almost 3, and 4, who I've helped raise for the past 2.5 years. When my boyfriend and I first started dating, I had so much more patience and empathy with his daughters. At the time, I was also taking a gap year from college. Currently, I'm a full-time student and I work part-time. Recently, every time the little girls start crying, I immediately get irritated and want to yell at them. I don't, but the urge makes me feel so bad and ashamed. I mean, they're just kids, and of course they're going to cry and scream. I just have big emotions in general. I want to be there for them and validate their feelings, but I can't seem to even get control of my own emotions. Does this have something to do with my own unhealed inner child, or am I just burnt out? Is there anything I can do to get back to a place of compassion and patience? Thank you for everything you do. I've learned so much from you in this community. I hope you have a wonderful day." Thank you, you too. So, okay. A couple of thoughts. Number 1, this sounds like burnout to me, but we'll get into the other option too, because I think it could be both of these things. Now, the reason I think it's burnout is because you had more patience and empathy earlier on, but you weren't in school. You were taking a gap year. Now that you're in school and working part-time and essentially are, a mother also, because you're helping raise 2 girls, that's a lot on your plate. And you went from having a lot of time and obviously then therefore a lot of patience to having probably 0 free time and therefore not having any patience. And it can be really difficult. And that burnout can happen. If you don't know, I did a bunch of videos about burnout, but one of the key symptoms of burnout is that irritation, being irritated at someone for wanting something from you. This could be your dog. This could be your child. This could be your partner. This could be someone at work. It could be anything. And the reason burnout happens, and just pay attention to this, think about this, put this, let's be curious if this is happening, is when the effort for what we're doing in life, our effort, isn't at least commensurate or less than the reward that we get out of it. Does that make sense? So our reward needs to be greater than the effort we're putting in, or at least balanced. And right now I have a feeling that your effort, so the reward is good. You love your boyfriend and you love his little daughters. It's good. Your effort used to be right here. Just taking care of the girls, have a gap year. Maybe I work part-time. Now your effort in life has shot up and the reward stays the same. So slowly but surely, we're just feeling completely overwhelmed. We're taxed and overworked and essentially underpaid, And so know that that's okay. I think almost every parent goes through this. That's why when people, I feel like any mom or dad out there, any parent, if you said to them, it's ridiculous if you ever felt like screaming at your children or wanting to throw something at them, they'd be like, they'd think they were a terrible parent, right? Like if you ever said that to someone, they'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" Like every day, like they test my patience every day. It doesn't mean we act on that, but that means it's hard. It's taxing. Most of my friends with children say it's like a job unlike any other. It brings them so much joy and so much suffering simultaneously. And so know that you're not alone. Getting irritated and having a short temper with children is something I think almost every parent goes through. Frankly, I think the biggest is because of the lack of sleep and the amount of effort that's still needed to be put in to raise humans. It's a huge, privilege, but also a huge job. And that's when people say like, I'm just a stay-at-home parent. I'm like, not just, that's a fucking full-time, that is a full-time job, you're doing the Lord's work. So anyway, I think it sounds like burnout, but also I do want to address the fact that you said, could it be my own unhealed inner child? Now, if we find ourselves struggling with compassion for children all the time, the fact that yours used to not be this way is why I don't think this is it, but it could be part of it. Now, if we've been neglecting our own inner child and we think that, he or she is like stupid and lashing out and just like so whiny and so sensitive and we've always kind of poo-pooed her or him and told him to like shut up and sit down and like ignored, which sometimes we do, especially when we have trauma in our background where we're like, that's too much. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to deal with that. You're too sensitive. I can't help you. There's nothing I can do to make things better for you. Shut up. And we do that. And I know that sounds really aggressive, but we do that internally a lot where we just like stuff things down. It's essentially telling our inner child just to sit down and shut up. And that the fact that that's not healed for you, and that might be still a very open and raw wound, being around children that could be of the age when you were abused or harmed, or the reason that you're struggling with this inner child work, to be around that age can be really triggering. And it could be, especially since we have all this other stuff going on, right? We're working and going to school. We can find ourselves more vulnerable to those emotions as well. So I just want to put that in there too, that could be part of it. It's not necessarily one or the other. It could be both. And so really the best advice I have is therapy. And if you can't afford it or you don't have the time, I understand. But then we'll attack the burnout, and we really need to take real time off. Like, I know he, has his 2 kids and you love him and you want to be with him, but you need like a long weekend away from all that shit. Period. And I know that you can be like, but I can't. You can. We can always say we can't. Oh, I don't have time, or I can't do this. You can. It's all about choices, and it's all about communication and letting him know, hey, I felt myself feeling extremely irritated and short-tempered. I don't want to be that way. I think I'm really burnt out. I need just a weekend away. I need like 2 days off. I don't, because it is a job. Let's not pretend being a parent is not a job. The sooner we start talking about it like it's a job, the less people will feel judged for being stay-at-home parents or feeling burnt out from working essentially 2 jobs, and you're working like 3. So let's cut you some slack. You're going to need a real break, and you're going to need to find ways to incorporate self-care into your daily routine. If that means when you finish work or school, you don't go home right away, you take 30 minutes of free time for you, maybe that's what works. And it's like you do that once a week. Or maybe it means that we need to do more breath in things, like things that are fulfilling, right? Because we need to move up that reward. So maybe that means that we go see our friends and really connect with them, or we have a date night and we get a babysitter and we really connect with our boy. Like whatever it is that helps you feel filled back in and filled back up versus, sucked dry from all your energy, that's going to be what will help you sustain, what will help you push through and not feel so burnt out. And then obviously the therapy part and that component is going to be key in that inner child work. I also have videos about that if you wanted to watch for more information. And that could be part of your self-care as well. I just know it can be difficult, but the fact that you're in school, I encourage you to look into it and see if they offer it. And that could be something you could put at the end of your day. And that could be easily like 2 birds, 1 stone, working on the trauma and healing that inner child, and also finding a way to take care of yourself and get some time off. Those are my thoughts. Now, the final question number 8 says, hi, Katie. How do you deal with inner loyalty conflicts in therapy? Oh my God, if I got paid extra for every one of these, I'd be a rich lady. I find it very difficult to tell my therapist something about my parents and upbringing that didn't go well. I know criminal and bad things have happened, but I don't want to hurt my parents at all. I feel it's important to speak out to help myself, and at the same time, I feel like I'm betraying them. What choices should I make in this, and how to deal with this loyalty conflict? Man, okay, tough love therapist coming in hot. Are you ready? Why is it that we tend to want to protect people who never protected us? Why? That always blows my mind. Is it the parentified child in us? Probably. Is it the good enough mother, meaning our parents sucked ass, but they're like the best we had? So we're like, oh, I guess it's okay. And that's all we've got. So we don't want anything to fuck with it because we're like, without them, I've got nothing. Like, what is it? It kills me every time. And this happens all the time, where I will have patients who have this huge history of like parents allowing abuse or being the actual abuser. And we don't want to tell on them. We don't want to get them in trouble, when I'm like, they're a dirtbag and they deserve to be in jail. Now, I know, again, that's tough love therapist. I'm going to put her away for a minute because I understand also there's trauma bonding And I have a video about trauma bonding. I was even on the podcast Coffee and Convos with Kale and Lindsay, where we talked about it, because I know Kale struggles a lot with trauma bonding. And it's really common because, again, like that good enough parent where we're like, I'm just going to try to do everything they need and do everything they want so that they won't hurt me anymore. And we can bond with them as a way to protect ourselves. It's almost like fawning, where we like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fawn is like extreme people pleasing to protect ourselves from further abuse. That could be, kind of what's going on for you. And so to be truthful, letting your therapist know about this, I'm sure they already do. If everyone that's in the house and if you are over 18, they cannot press chart, like child abuse and stuff can't be reported. You can't report it in the past, like unless they could still be a threat to a child. So if there are still children in the home, then we'd have to report it. Does that make sense? I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but anyways, so there are things that you can tell without knowing that your therapist is going to have to call the police or file criminal charges or anything like that. However, I just want you to consider, if they did bad things, what are those laws for? And aren't they meant to protect people like you? And don't you kind of wish that someone had protected you earlier on? Or like imagine it was happening to me or one of your best friends or something. Wouldn't you want someone to tell so that they could be protected, so that it wouldn't happen? I know you have the sense of loyalty towards them, probably just through that trauma bonding and what we could also call Stockholm syndrome. But who are you really protecting? By protecting them, what does that protect? What are we prioritizing here? And I know easier said than done. And yes, there's always some guilt associated with filing criminal cases or leaving. Like I've had patients who have to leave like a younger sibling because their parents won't let them take them and they can't kidnap them. And there's a lot of guilt associated with being the older one and getting out. And there's just a lot of, because it's such a toxic and abusive environment, there's a lot of unhealthy messages that we've heard over the years, and it makes things really complicated. So just be patient with yourself. Be kind, talk to your therapist about what's coming up for you. Consider who you're really protecting and why. And part of I don't know if this will be true for you, but some of my patients over the years and even viewers have alluded to this without maybe realizing, but you're really protecting your quote unquote family unit. And even though it sucks and there was criminals, bad things that were happening and you were abused and it was terrible, there's still this hope or this protection, this loyalty to our family unit, being like, well, I only have one, so I need to protect it. And I want to make sure nothing bad happens to them. Right. And we can feel like we're kind of responsible for that, even though we are not. And if something bad happened, we can say something, and that's our right as a person. But I know it's hard. Keep talking about it, keep thinking about it. And hopefully some of the things I said kind of shook it loose for you so you can try to make a decision that's good for you and anyone else who might be being harmed by them. I know it's hard. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. And at the end of the day, I know they're still your parents, but also, they never protected you. If bad things were happening and they never protected you, why are you protecting them? Maybe journal about that. See what comes up. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sending in your questions. I hope all of my answers were helpful. I know I had a couple of interruptions with Roxy barking and we had somebody come to the door. So I hope I didn't get off topic too much there. You know how I love to talk I can really get off topic and go down a windy road, but I hope it was helpful. I love you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Ask her about your self-esteem or why your feelings hurt. You can ask her why breakups suck or why you've hit a plateau. Inquire all those questions you've always wanted to know.